Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about some of the miracle stories that are happening right here in our own city, in our own state, every day. My name is Tony Kausha, and the title of our show is Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. Please note, this show is not about religion, and we're not trying to change anyone's religion, and we're not trying to get you to join any religion. It's just about miracle stories. I don't know of any religion on the planet that doesn't talk about miracles. That's why religions begin, because they have something that's telling them there's really a God. But we're not going to get into that. We're going to just talk about miracles and leave the decisions about all that up to you. So we don't care what religion you are. We just want to talk about miracles. If you are an atheist, I think you'll enjoy the program as well, although I can't guarantee you'll remain an atheist very long after you hear many convincing stories, coincidence kinds of stories about miracles. You can email me your own stories if you wish. We'll try to use all we can on the show. I can't guarantee we will, depending on volume and time, but you're welcome to send your stories on to us, and we will mention them when we can. You can send them to the following email address. But please notice that if we do use your story, we won't mention your name. We'll keep you anonymous. And we suggest that in your story, when you send it to us, don't use your correct name. That way anyone listening will not be able to figure out that it was you that sent the story in. The email address you can send your stories to is very easy to remember. It consists of 2 words and 3 numbers. The first word is Tony, spelled Tony, and the second word is and, spelled A-N-D, and the numbers are 777. So once again, the name is Tony and 777 at AOL.com. Well, let us begin. Our first coincidence miracle today is someone who tells us they were out driving and they were praying to God, asking God to help them with some things that they had to get done that day. And while they were praying, they saw a car at an intersection. It had a license plate number 555, and 3 5s means the presence of God, the grace of God. And that was great, except what even happened after that was even greater, because after they left that intersection, they were stunned by the 3 5s and very grateful for that. The very next intersection, they saw a car pull up in the intersection, same time they were there, and they saw a license plate on that car. It had the letter T, a capital letter, bold letter T, and then the word God. So it was TGod, and they took that to mean thank God, thanks be to God. So it was a very great inspiration for them and for us. They were praying. They saw 3 5s at one intersection, meaning the presence of God. And then the next intersection, a car pulls in to that intersection at the same time as them, and they have on their license plate a capital T and then the word God, and they took that to mean thanks be to God and thank God for answering my prayer. Our next coincidence miracle is from a regular listener who tells us they were saying their rosary. They finished saying their rosary, and they got a phone call from a friend of theirs who was in a lot of stress because they had lost their car keys, and they asked them to please say a prayer to St.Anthony and ask St. Anthony to help them find their car keys. And they were shopping at a supermarket, and apparently they lost their keys, and they couldn't get to their car and open the car because they lost their keys somewhere in the supermarket. And so they called their friend, asked them, this person who's relating the story to us, to pray to St. Anthony because they had had miracles happen in the past. So they did. They said a prayer, and they got a call immediately back that they found the car keys on the floor at the supermarket in one of the aisles right after they had asked St. Anthony. So I know for probably nearly 100 years now, people have been praying to St. Anthony for finding lost articles, so he's very famous. St. Anthony's very famous for that. And this was just another story like that, but if you haven't heard the story before, when you're trying to find lost items or missing things, ask St. Anthony to help you and There are thousands and thousands of stories about people who have gotten this kind of help. Well, here's an amazing story. One of our listeners tells us they were having a bad day. Things were not going well. They were getting frustrated about things that were not happening the way they needed to happen. They didn't tell us the details, but we all have had frustrating days. So they decided to take off and go to noon mass. They were able to get to a mass at noontime. And they tell us that while they drove off, and what happened was they found at one of the intersections, they were following a Jeep, and Jeeps have these tire coverings on the back of their cars that cover the tires. And the wrapping on this one said, "Stay calm, hold on, keep going." That's what it said. Stay calm, hold on, keep going. And the reason why it's such a blessing is because when they got to the noon mass, the priest who gave his lecture as part of the process during the mass, they call it a homily. The priest's homily said the same kind of thing. Stay calm, keep going, hold on, don't give up. Okay, so tremendous story. Imagine if that happened to you. This person was certainly very excited about all that happening. They clearly got a message from God in the car wrapping on the tire, and now the priest at the noon mass just happens coincidentally, really miraculously, to say the same kind of message that they saw in the car outside. Our next story is from a woman who tells us that she was inspired to look for a picture of a unicorn as a clue, as a sign that she was going to find her dream house that day. And as soon as she got the inspiration, about 5 or 10 minutes later, she gets a call from a friend of hers who said that they just saw a picture of a unicorn in a book they were looking at, and they were inspired to send her a picture, and they sent her a text of a picture of a unicorn. And the woman did get the house that she was dreaming of on that afternoon while she was shopping for a house. I hope you noticed that this was all due to prayer. She was praying, she got inspired to look for a sign, a clue of a unicorn. A friend calls her and says she just saw a unicorn. She's sending her a picture of it. Pretty amazing stuff, right? And that's what happens when people keep talking to God. If you talk to God all day long, you ask him what to do all day long, prayer means you're talking to God. That's what prayer means. So if you just have conversations with God all day long, then you are praying. You don't have to say set formulas. You don't have to say certain prayers. You just can talk to God as a friend. And that's called prayer, okay? So when you talk to people, that's conversation. When you talk to God, that's prayer. Our next story is from someone who tells us that their husband had throat cancer. He was going for treatments for a while, and they were making him very sick. She didn't get into a lot of specifics, but he really got very, very sick from the treatments for this throat cancer. And they kept praying and beseeching God and pleading with God for help, that things would go better, things would go well. And they got inspired to stop the treatment, just stop going for the treatment. Now, I'm not advocating this personally. I'm just telling you this person in prayer was inspired to stop the treatment. So they stopped the treatment, and they tell us that the cancer went away. So they believe that they were praying and God inspired them, that they were healed, and to stop the treatment, and sure enough, the cancer had gone away. So I'm not advocating, you need to talk to your doctors, of course. But, you also need to pray and do what God is telling you to do. In this particular person's case, they believed that God told them to stop the treatment, and they found out that the cancer was cured, and they're sharing that with us because they got a lot of joy out of this. Again, I say talk to your doctors about your treatments. Doctors give great advice. Doctors pray as well. God talks to doctors just as well as he talks to everybody else. So ask your doctor, consult with your doctor, and if you're praying and you get inspired, you ask your doctor, and he may say, well, let's stop the treatments for a month and see what happens. So ask your doctor to guide you, okay? Our next story is from a very experienced truck driver, many years of driving trucks with a safety record. He was driving over a hill one day. The visibility was not too good because it was a high hill. So he's at the top of the hill ready to come down on the other side. And he tells us he got hit head-on in the middle of the early morning, head-on at 100 miles an hour from somebody coming up the hill. And he spent many months in a hospital near death for a long time. Many people were praying for him. He was praying as well. And he relates the story that he has no doubt there's a God, and his nurses and doctors were convinced he was getting miracles steadily. So he wants to thank God by sharing his story. He believes that God healed him completely and saved him. He's fully recovered now, and it's a great story. He knew he was dying for several months. Our next story is from a man who tells us he was driving to work, and he was very frustrated about a lot of expenses that were hitting him lately, far above his budgets. He was having stresses at work. So he's having a very bad start to a day driving off to work, and he was praying, pleading with God, please help me. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to ask. That's the kind of a prayer he was saying. He got to an intersection, and when he got to the intersection, he saw a car pull in right at the same time as him with a license plate number 777 while he was praying, and he knows the number 777 is the number, it's God's holy number, indicates that it's God's power, participation, and permission. That's what the 3 sevens typically means. And so he got inspired that God was telling him his prayer was being heard. He relates to us that he was able to cope with the stress since then. He's been able to meet ends, make enough money to cover his bills. He's sure that God gave him that clue and that sign at that moment to assure him that God was going to help him. And he said he's received the help, and he wants to thank God by sharing this story with us. And I know you've heard many people who see 3 sevens and have similar things happen to them, especially when you get into an intersection and it shows up exactly at the same intersection that you're at. So this is another story like many we've gotten. I try to tell everybody I've been getting cases like this in my life for about 60 years now. And that's why I wrote 2 books about coincidence miracles. So I personally have had this happen to me many times in my life. And I try to tell the rest of you, if you're not asking God for help, that's the ingredient. That's the missing link. You keep asking God for help, and he'll show you that he's helping you, and he will help you. He's your best friend. He's constantly with you all day long. Our next coincidence miracle is something that happened to me. A very good friend of mine. I've known him for about, I think 20 years now. Very good friend of mine. He's had many miracles in his life. He's shared many stories with us in the past, which are on our radio show. He called me one day and he said, Tony, I know your name is Anthony, and we've had a problem. My daughter just visited me. She got back home, and she tells me that she lost a very precious and expensive earring that's very precious and important to her and very expensive. I spent a half an hour looking around everywhere we were and even places we were not at, all around the place here, and spent a half an hour, can't find it nowhere. She's triple-checked her car and her house, and we just can't find it, Tony. So would you please do me a favor, say a prayer to St. Anthony. I know your name is Anthony. That might help us. So I did. I said a prayer to St. Anthony, and like 5 minutes later, I got a call, and he said, Tony, I got to tell you what happened. Right after I hung up from you, I started looking again, and I found the earring sitting right in the middle of the floor in clear view, unmistakable. You couldn't miss it, which means that when I was out searching before I called you, it wasn't there, Tony, because I would have seen it. I'm positive it wasn't there. So I wanted to let you know we got our earring. We got an answer to the prayer to St. Anthony, and it was like 5 minutes after I called you. God bless you all. I'll talk to you next week.